I want you to just close your eyes for a second.
Okay.
Imagine a really dusty, sun-baked cinematic frontier. Like the heat is literally physically shimmering off the hardpan dirt, distorting the horizon.
Oh, yeah, the classic spaghetti western vibe.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And out of that haze walks this lone gunslinger. And he is dragging a heavy wooden coffin behind him through this thick, sucking mud.
Right.
And then you hear it, this booming, almost quasi-Elvis baritone voice singing over this incredibly twangy, aggressive, sharp Stratocaster guitar.
It's unmistakable.
If you were any kind of movie fan, you probably know this instantly, right?
Yeah.
It's the iconic opening sequence to Quentin Tarantino's film Django Unchained.
Yeah, a brilliant scene.
It's a scene, and specifically a sound, that just absolutely grabs you by the throat. I mean, everyone knows that sound.
They do, yeah.
But the man who built it, he was a classically trained, tango-obsessed Jewish Argentine who actually had to sue his own best friend just to get his name on a movie poster.
Which is just wild to think about.
It really is. So this is the story of Louis Bacalov.
And, the visual impact of a scene like that so often just completely eclipses the architect of the sound itself.
Oh, absolutely.
You have this massive auditory imprint left on global cinema, yet the guy holding the pen flies entirely under the radar of the general public.
Which is why we're doing this.
Exactly. And looking through the wonderfully diverse sources we have for this deep dive, I mean, we've got detailed biographical archives, audiophile vinyl reviews, some really passionate community essays. A picture emerges of a true musical chameleon.
Right.
We're going to trace a journey that starts in the vibrant, colliding cultures of Buenos Aires and then travels through the gritty, hyper-stylized spaghetti westerns of Italy.
And we get into some serious drama, too.
Oh, a bitter studio controversy over the film A Bullet for the General, before eventually, climbing to the absolute pinnacle of Hollywood recognition with an Academy Award for Il Postino.
So if you, listening right now, have ever felt like your own hard work is being overshadowed by a famous colleague, or, if you just happen to love the gritty, absolutely wild world of 1960s Italian cinema, this is exactly where you want to be.
It's a fascinating ride.
It really is. So we have to start in Buenos Aires. The year is 1933. This is where Louis Bacalov was born to a family of Eastern European Jewish descent.
Right, and while he later identified as agnostic, those cultural roots combined with just, the environment of Buenos Aires itself created this staggeringly potent incubator for a young musician.
It's a total melting pot.
Exactly. I mean, the 1930s and 40s in Argentina were a time of immense cultural ferment. You had these massive waves of European immigrants bringing over their classical traditions, colliding in real time with local folk music. And underpinning it all, yes, is the ever-present heartbeat of the tango. It was a city that sounded like, nowhere else on earth at the time.
But he wasn't just passively absorbing this atmosphere, right? The sources say he was plunged into this serious, unrelenting musical discipline almost immediately.
Very early on.
He started studying the piano at the age of 5. And not just with, a local neighborhood teacher. He studied under Professor Enrique Barenboim.
Which is huge.
Right. For anyone familiar with classical music, that name carries immense weight.
Oh, definitely.
That is the father and the teacher of the legendary conductor and pianist Daniel Barenboim.
And getting instruction from someone of Barenboim's caliber at age 5, that means you aren't just learning how to press keys to make a pretty sound.
You're learning the math of it all.
Exactly. You are learning the structural mathematics of music. You learn counterpoint.
Which, just to clarify for everyone, counterpoint is essentially the art of making two entirely different melodies play at the exact same time so they interlock perfectly.
Right, like gears in a clock.
Yeah.
You learn harmony, voice leading, the deep foundational architecture of how a symphony is actually built from the ground up.
Serious training.
It is. And this rigorous, highly structured classical training provided the absolute bedrock for every single genre he would tackle later in life.
I have to admit, though, when I read about this incredible elite pedigree in the sources, his next move kind of shocked me.
Oh, because he didn't stay in the classical world.
Yeah. He didn't stay locked in the ivory tower of classical performance. By his late teens and early 20s, he is just out of the conservatory, and he's living what the archives describe as his, quote, nomad years.
He hit the road.
He takes off touring all over South America with an orchestra. He ends up settling in Colombia for 4 years, living in Cali.
Right.
He's collaborating with theater directors, absorbing the rhythm of the continent, getting his hands dirty in the practical nightly grind of live performance.
Which is a totally different skill set than conservatory playing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's also during this time he meets and marries a journalist, Teresa Escobar.
And Teresa actually becomes the catalyst for the next massive leap in his life.
Okay, how so?
Well, with her support, they decide to cross the Atlantic and set sail for Europe. They land first in Spain. And we really have to consider the geopolitical and social context here because this is the 1950s.
Right.
The Iberian Peninsula is firmly under the dictatorial regime of Francisco Franco.
And the sources heavily emphasize that this environment was notoriously oppressive. It was actively hostile to artists, intellectuals, and anyone who just, didn't fit a very rigid state-sanctioned mold.
Yeah, very dangerous for free thinkers. Yet, amidst that stifling atmosphere, Bacalov does something fascinating. He gets signed by a flamenco troupe.
Wow.
Right. He spends an entire year touring Spain, playing night after night.
That's crazy.
Just think about the synthesis happening in his brain at this point.
Seriously.
He has the Eastern European Jewish heritage, the strict architectural classical training from Barenboim, the sensual tango of his youth in Buenos Aires, the theatrical sensibilities honed in Colombia, and now he is internalizing the complex, polyrhythmic, deeply emotional fire of Spanish flamenco.
Which is so completely different from classical structure.
Exactly. Flamenco is about raw, unfiltered passion pushing against strict rhythmic boundaries.
That is an insane, completely volatile musical cocktail for one person to hold.
It really is.
But, the political climate eventually became too much. The Franco regime was simply too suffocating for a young, creative family, so they ended up fleeing across the border to Paris.
A classic artist move.
Yeah. And the image the sources paint of Bacalov in late 50s Paris sounds terribly romantic on the surface, playing piano in smoky, bohemian cabarets and theaters.
Oh, it sounds lovely.
But beneath that romantic veneer, the guy was hustling. He was working exhausting hours trying to support a growing family on a cabaret pianist's wages.
And the grind in Paris was relentless, but it absolutely forged his work ethic.
Yeah.
And then comes 1959 and an event that completely redirects his trajectory.
What happened?
The immensely popular Italian singer Claudio Villa happens to contact Bacalov and asks him to play the piano on a concert tour in Rome.
Just a random connection that changes everything.
Exactly.
And the biographical archives describe his arrival in Rome as absolute love at first sight. He felt instantly, viscerally at home there.
It resonated with him.
Yeah, he doesn't even finish the tour before he makes up his mind. He tells Teresa to pack up the kids and move the entire family from Paris to Rome. They stake their claim in Italy.
And the timing was just impeccable.
Oh, yeah.
Italy in the late 1950s and early 1960s was experiencing this unprecedented economic miracle.
A post-war boom.
Right. The country was rebuilding rapidly after the war. People finally had disposable income, and a massive cultural boom followed. The recording industry was exploding, desperately hungry for talent.
And Bacalov was right there.
He was. He decides to sign his work under a slightly more Italian-sounding pseudonym, Luis Enriquez, and just walks right into the bustling studio floors of RCA and Phone, etc.
And he absolutely takes over.
He does.
He becomes this powerhouse composer, arranger, and conductor for Italian pop royalty. We're talking about massive artists like Nico Fidenco, Rita Pavone, Gianni Morandi.
Huge names.
He is churning out massive chart-topping hits. But, this is where I actually need to challenge the narrative a bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
Seeing a Barenboim-trained prodigy, someone who understands the deep mathematics of counterpoint, suddenly making a living churning out 3-minute pop jingles, it feels almost like a tragic waste of talent.
You think so?
Well, it's the equivalent of a Renaissance master making a living painting commercial billboards,
Did the necessity of making a living dilute his classical genius?
It's a fair question, but the counter-argument to that, and honestly what the trajectory of his entire career ultimately proves, is that the pop industry was the crucible that actually activated his genius for the screen.
How so?
Think about the extreme constraints of pop arranging. You have exactly 3 minutes to capture a listener's attention through a tiny, probably low-quality radio speaker.
You have to establish a mood, build an emotional arc, and deliver a hook that they will hum for the rest of the day. There is zero room for self-indulgent 10-minute symphonic wandering.
Nice.
It requires absolute ruthless economy and precision.
So it's essentially training in how to emotionally manipulate an audience as efficiently as possible.
Exactly.
A pop song is just a miniature movie scene.
That is a perfect way to look at it. Working in pop music taught Bacalov how to hook an audience instantly. It taught him the mechanics of a strong, immediate melody and how to orchestrate around a focal point, in this case, a lead vocal, without drowning it out.
That makes total sense.
So when he eventually transitioned into scoring films, he brought that pop music immediacy with him. He knew how to make music that was harmonically complex enough to satisfy a discerning cinephile, but catchy enough to sell millions of soundtrack records.
Yeah.
The marriage of Barenboim's classical architecture and the RCA studio's commercial instincts is exactly what made his later film scores so revolutionary.
That makes the transition to the mid-1960s feel completely organic then.
Right.
He has the classical chops, he has the pop sensibilities, and now he is stepping into the wild, dusty, blood-soaked world of the Italian Western.
The spaghetti Western era.
Yeah, the year is 1966. Yeah. The Italian Western boom is in full swing, and director Sergio Corbucci is making a film called Django, starring Franco Nero.
Yeah.
And Corbucci taps Luis Bacalov for the score.
And Corbucci had a very specific, very ambitious vision for the opening of this film.
He didn't want the usual stuff.
No, not at all. He didn't want a traditional sweeping orchestral introduction. He wanted a title track with a distinct Elvis-like rock and roll energy.
Oh.
We wanted swagger, danger, and modernity. But, you know, an independent Italian production could not exactly afford Elvis Presley.
No, I imagine not. So, enter a man named Rocky Roberts.
Yes.
The sources dive into Roberts' background, and I have to say, it is so unbelievable, I almost thought it was fiction.
It reads like a movie script itself.
It does. Roberts was born in Miami. He was a welterweight boxer, winning championships in 4 states at a very young age.
A tough guy.
Yeah, but a severe eye injury abruptly ends his boxing career. So he pivots. He joins the Navy at 17, serves on the aircraft carrier USS Independence, and starts singing with a band formed by fellow sailors called the Airedales.
Right.
The band finds unexpected success while stationed in Europe. Roberts moves to Italy, and this former Miami boxer becomes a massive pop star in the Italian charts.
It just speaks volumes about the wildly cosmopolitan, cross-pollinated nature of the Italian entertainment industry at the time.
It's crazy.
Think about it. You have a Jewish-Argentine composer writing a song for a Miami-born ex-boxer to sing over an Italian Western that was filmed in Spain.
That is the ultimate 1960s cultural mashup.
It really is. And when Corbucci needed that Elvis sound-alike, Rocky Robert delivered something arguably far superior for the context of the film.
Oh, totally.
He brought this bombastic theatrical machismo to the vocal performance that a polished, traditional crooner simply couldn't have achieved.
And we really need to break down the actual sonic landscape of that Django soundtrack.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the vocal track that makes it so iconic.
Right, the instrumentation is key.
When you analyze the instrumentation, you hear these Hank Marvin-style, really twangy Stratocaster guitar riffs violently slicing through the mix.
Yes.
You have traditional orchestral templates, sweeping strings, grand piano, but then Bacalov laces the whole thing with completely avant-garde fingers.
Oh, absolutely.
You get ear-piercing brass exclamations that sound almost like screams, and frantic, panic-inducing cello runs, and underneath it all, these driving, heavy, rock-based bass lines.
Yeah.
It is just a complete collision of genres.
And to truly appreciate the mechanics of Bacalov's achievement here, we have to contrast it directly with the other giant in the room, Ennio Morricone.
Ah, yes. The inevitable comparison.
I can't avoid it. Morricone had essentially invented the sound of the spaghetti western a couple years earlier with a fistful of dollars. But Morricone's approach was highly experimental. He relied on cacophonous, boundary-pushing soundscapes. I mean, he turned actual sound effects into musical instruments, cracking whips, anvils, whistling, coyotes howling.
Yeah, Morricone's scores often feel surreal, almost dreamlike. They kind of lift the movie out of reality and turn it into a myth.
Exactly, a mythic quality. But Bacalov took a completely different path.
How so?
He leaned heavily into the traditional orchestral template. He didn't abandon the symphony orchestra for a jaw harp and a whistle,
Right.
But he manipulated that orchestra to make it feel darker, more brooding, and significantly less heroic than traditional American Western scores.
That makes sense.
If Morricone's music had a soaring mythic quality, Bacalov's music for Django feels physically grounded in the mud, it feels immediate, and it feels dangerous.
And the sources brought up a technical aspect of Italian Western production that honestly blew my mind and completely changes how you listen to these scores.
Your post-production dubbing.
Yes. In these films, 0 sound was recorded on set. No boom mics hanging over the actors. Nothing.
Oh.
Everything. The dialogue, the footsteps, the gunshots, the wind, and obviously the music was constructed entirely from scratch in post-production.
Right, the Italian film industry treated sound as a completely separate artificial art piece, synthesized much later in a dubbing studio.
Which is so weird to think about.
It is, especially because Hollywood, conversely, was obsessed with sync sound realism. If a horse gallops on screen in an American film, the sound mixer wants you to hear the actual, literal sound of those hooves hitting the dirt recorded on the day.
Yeah. It seems like scoring a film without hearing the natural rhythm of the scene, like the breathing of the actors, the ambient noise of the room, would be incredibly restrictive.
You would think so.
Right. Like, how do you match the emotional tempo of a scene if you were just watching silent footage?
Well, surprisingly, it actually liberated the composers, and particularly someone like Bacalov.
Really? Liberated them?
Yeah. Because the sound was constructed completely artificially anyway, it freed him from having to slavishly follow the literal, physical reality of the scene.
Oh, I see.
He utilized this freedom to pioneer what we call profound thematic dissonance.
Okay, let's make sure that concept is crystal clear for everyone listening.
Sure.
Thematic dissonance isn't just, playing sad music over a happy scene. It's way more jarring than that.
Much more.
It's like scrolling through a terrifying apocalyptic news feed on your phone while a really peppy, upbeat TikTok audio plays in the background.
That is a brilliant modern analogy.
Your brain just sort of short circuits because the emotional vibe of the audio actively contradicts the data your eyes are processing.
Exactly. And in practice on the screen, if you have a scene of brutal, torturous violence, and by the way, Django was famously violent, earning bans in the UK for decades because of it.
Oh yeah, the ear scene alone.
Right. A typical Hollywood composer scores that torture with terrifying atonal horror music, explicitly telling the audience to feel scared.
Right, holding your hand emotionally.
Exactly. Bacalov, however, might score that exact same torture scene with an upbeat, joyful Mexican tango.
Which is so messed up when you watch it.
It is. Or he might underscore a thrilling, fast-paced shootout with a menacing, lethargic, slow waltz.
And the dissonance forces you out of your comfort zone. When the music actively disobeys the emotion of the image, you stop just reacting viscerally and start intellectualizing what you were actually watching.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes the violence feel ironic or even surreal.
It adds an entire layer of commentary that the script itself doesn't have to carry. And that is vital when we discuss the political nature of these films.
Right, because the sources note that director Sergio Corbucci's films were frequently political, tackling really heavy themes of fascism and authoritarianism.
Very deliberately.
Yeah, and just to be clear, we are just impartially reporting on the themes the filmmakers themselves deliberately baked into their work here. But in Django, the primary villains are not generic bank robbers. They are a clan of violent, racist fascists wearing red hoods and terrorizing the local population. The political intent from Corbucci is undeniable.
And this is exactly where Bacalov's pop-painting background pays off massively.
Oh, so?
The dialogue in these Italian westerns was often pretty sparse, and because it was dubbed later, it could sometimes feel a bit disconnected or slightly cheesy.
Yeah, the lip sync isn't always great.
Right. So the music had to carry the actual intellectual and emotional weight of the film's anti-authoritarian themes.
Wow.
Bacalov's bombastic, defiant score communicates the film's anti-imperialist core without any character needing to deliver some long expositional speech about freedom.
The music operates as the rebellion itself.
Exactly. The moment that driving electric guitar kicks in, the audience feels the defiance in their chest.
The music is doing the heavy lifting for the screenplay.
Completely.
So, Django becomes a massive global hit. It spawns dozens of unofficial sequels. Bacalov's reputation is entirely cemented.
He's on top of the world.
But the film industry is rarely a meritocracy.
Sadly, no.
The sources detail a massive, really heartbreaking controversy that erupted around 1966 and 1967 regarding a film called A Bullet for the General, which is also known as Quien Sabe.
And this incident is just a masterclass in the brutal reality of studio interference and marketing economics.
Walk us through it.
So the director, Damiano Damiani, is mounting this politically charged Western set during the Mexican Revolution. He specifically wants Louis Bacalov to score the film, knowing Bacalov possesses the exact stylistic vocabulary required.
Makes sense.
The producer, however, issues an astonishingly blunt ultimatum.
Yeah, the producer tells the director that Bacalov is allowed to write the music, but he must do so under the, quote, leadership or supervision of Ennio Morricone.
Right.
And the non-negotiable condition is that Ennio Morricone's name must be the one plastered on the movie posters and featured in the opening credits.
Because by this point, Morricone is a global superstar. His name alone guarantees a certain baseline of ticket sales.
That's all about the money.
Exactly. The producers are viewing his name not as an artistic credit for work performed, but as a marketing gimmick. Literally a brand logo to slap on the box to move product.
I mean, put yourself in Bacalov's shoes for a second.
It's infuriating.
You are an accomplished composer. You just revolutionized the genre with Django. And now you are being ordered to essentially ghostwrite a complex cinematic score just so the studio can exploit your best friend's name.
And they were very good friends.
Right. Bacalov and Morricone were exceptionally close. They had immense mutual respect.
And the loyalty demonstrated here between the two of them is just remarkable.
Yeah, what happened?
Bacalov immediately went to Morricone and disclosed the entire scheme the producers were demanding.
Good for them.
And Morricone's reaction tells you everything you need to know about his artistic integrity. Realizing his name was being weaponized as a marketplace draw, Morricone flat out refused to steer or supervise Louis.
He wouldn't play along.
He recognized it was Bacalov's project and refused to interfere. So Bacalov goes away relatively unbothered by Morricone and writes the entire brilliant score completely by himself.
But the producer held the purse strings, right? So he still got his way regarding the marketing.
Unfortunately, yes.
When A Bullet for the General was released in specific international territories, most notably in Spain, the studio enacted a complete erasure. They removed Bacalov's name entirely.
Gone.
Gone. The posters, the theatrical credits, the promotional materials, they all exclusively credited Ennio Morricone.
I mean, just imagine pouring your soul into a sweeping, complex orchestration, going to the theater for the premiere, and your name simply does not exist on the screen.
It's gut-wrenching.
It has been stolen and handed to your famous friend to sell a few extra tickets. Bacalov was understandably furious, and he sought immediate legal action.
He hired a lawyer to sue the Spanish distribution company to correct the record and, claim his rightful royalties.
Which is completely justified.
But the universe, however, had a deeply cynical sense of humor.
Oh, this part is just tragic.
Before the lawsuit could even make it to a courtroom, the Spanish distribution company went completely bankrupt and dissolved.
Wow.
They ceased to exist. There was literally no entity left to sue.
And the detail that perfectly crystallizes the absurdity of this entire situation is that when the film premiered with his name proudly displayed on it, Ennio Morricone had literally never heard a single note of the music.
Not one note.
He was being advertised globally as the mastermind behind a masterpiece he hadn't even listened to.
And for decades, fans and critics alike just assumed it was a Morricone score, or perhaps, a collaborative effort where Morricone did all the heavy lifting. The public was entirely in the dark.
Completely.
But Bacalov didn't let this horrific industry betrayal sour him on the Western genre. He kept writing, proving his range extended far beyond the electric twang of Django.
He had so much more to give.
Yeah, and the sources highlight another incredible film from 1969 called The Price of Power, directed by Tonino Valeri.
And The Price of Power is a wildly ambitious film.
It really sounds like it.
It functions as a spaghetti western allegory for the 1963 assassination of U.S. President John F. Kennedy, while simultaneously commenting on 1960s American racial politics.
I mean, the mechanics of mapping a 20th century political assassination onto a post-Civil War Western are just fascinating.
It's a bold move.
The film features a president, clearly the JFK, stand-in, planning a trip to Dallas, Texas. A conspiracy forms among corrupt local officials, wealthy landowners, and racists who want to maintain their grip on power and oppose the president's progressive policies.
Right.
They orchestrate a public assassination, frame a patsy, silence him, and the hero has to unravel the conspiracy. They even filmed the assassination sequence to visually mimic the famous Zapruder film.
Which is incredibly bold for a genre usually focused on, bank heists and revenge.
Exactly.
And this challenge forces us to look at the adaptability of the composer.
Yeah, how do you score that?
Because a political thriller dealing with systemic corruption requires a completely different musical vocabulary than a standard shootout in the mud.
You cannot rely on bombastic electric guitars to score behind-the-scenes paranoia. You need tension. You need subtle motifs that weave through dialogue-heavy expositional scenes without distracting the audience.
So how does he achieve that sonically? How do you score paranoia?
Well, you utilize sustained dissonant string drones that sit just on the edge of the listener's comfort zone.
Oh, okay.
You employ repetitive, ticking, rhythmic figures that create a subconscious sense of a countdown of impending doom.
Like a ticking clock.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Bakalov's score for The Price of Power is highly regarded precisely because he pulled back on the overt, flashy pop western tropes. He delivered a sophisticated, highly structured orchestral score that elevated the political intrigue.
He showed his range.
He proved he was a master dramatist, capable of scoring the tension of a whispered conversation just as effectively as a massive gunfight.
So he conquers Italian pop, he redefines the Western, he navigates treacherous studio politics, but the timeline doesn't stop there.
Not at all. As the 1970s arrive, Bakalov's chameleon nature takes over again. He takes a pivot that seems entirely out of left field, diving headfirst into the world of Italian progressive rock.
And Italy in the 1970s was a global epicenter for progressive rock, often referred to as rock progressivo italiano.
Right.
This wasn't standard three-chord rock and roll. It was characterized by a deep structural integration of classical music forms, operatic vocal styles, and heavy experimental synthesizer use.
Which sounds perfect for him, actually.
It was tailor-made for a musician with Bakalov's specific classical pop background.
The sources mentioned he collaborates with a band called the New Trolls on an album called Concerto Grosso. We should probably unpack that term.
Yes, let's do that.
Because a concerto grosso is a Baroque musical form dating back to the 1700s. The basic architecture of it is that musical material is passed back and forth between a small group of soloists and a massive, full orchestra.
Right.
It is essentially a musical tennis match.
And Bacalov looks at this 18th century classical form and completely subverts the instrumentation. Instead of classical soloists playing violins or harpsichords, he inserts a long-haired rock band armed with electric guitars, heavy bass, and a drum kit.
That is so cool.
And he backs them with a traditional sweeping symphony orchestra. He composed and arranged the entire structure, seamlessly blending the raw, visceral energy of symphonic rock with the lush, atmospheric tension of cinematic scoring.
And he does something similar with the band Osana, right? For the film score, Milano Calibro 9.
He does.
The sources describe this as a gritty, violent, urban crime thriller, the Italian poliziottessi genre.
Yes, his collaboration with Hosanna created a soundtrack that is aggressive, frantic, and incredibly heavy.
Just match you the vibe of the movie.
Perfectly. The music matches the urban decay, the concrete landscapes, and the moral ambiguity of 1970s Italy. He took the same instincts for dissonance and tension he used to revolutionize the Western and applied them to modern urban thrillers using the aggressive vocabulary of rock music.
He is constantly mutating, constantly adapting to the era. But amidst all this relentless genre hopping, the sources reveal a core truth about him.
Yeah.
He never lost his Argentinian soul.
Never.
The tango was always there, simmering underneath the surface, waiting for the right moment.
Because tango wasn't just a style of music he enjoyed, it was his musical DNA.
Right.
As he matured and gained the freedom to pursue his own passion projects, he began to explicitly weave tango into his most ambitious classical and operatic works. He was literally pulling the music of the Buenos Aires dance halls into the sacred halls of European high culture.
And the sources highlight two monumental works that illustrate this perfectly.
They do.
The first is the Missa Tango, which premiered in Rome in the year 2000, performed by the orchestra and choir of the Accademia Nazionale di Santa Cecilia. It is a full Catholic liturgical mass set to the rhythms of tango.
And the synthesis required to make that work is just staggering.
I can't even imagine.
The Latin Mass, Kyrie, the Gloria, the Credo, has a rigid, sacred, deeply solemn structure. Bacalov infuses that sacred architecture with the sensual, syncopated, distinctly secular heartbeat of the tango.
That is such a bold clash of ideas.
It is. And to achieve this, he prominently features the bandon.
All right.
The bandon is an accordion-like instrument that is the absolute soul of tango music. It breathes, it has a wheezing, deeply melancholic quality to it.
It sounds so human.
Yes, and he places this instrument of the late-night dance halls right alongside a full classical symphony and a massive choir. It is a profound, triumphant statement on his dual identity.
And he pushes that synthesis even further 4 years later, in 2004, with an opera called Estaba la Madre.
Which is a very heavy piece.
It is. This piece tackles something incredibly heavy and historically painful. It is described in the sources as a secular Stabat Mater. A traditional Stabat Mater is a deeply mournful Christian hymn portraying the Virgin Mary's suffering during the crucifixion of Jesus. It is the ultimate musical archetype of maternal grief. But Bacalov takes this ancient form and recontextualizes it to address the mothers of the Argentinian desaparecidos.
And for context, during the brutal military dictatorship of Jorge Rafael Videla in Argentina in the late 1970s and early 80s, the state systematically and secretly abducted, tortured, and murdered tens of thousands of political dissidents, students, and innocent civilians.
It's horrific.
These were the disappeared ones. The mothers of the Plaza de Mayo were the women who bravely gathered in public wearing white headscarves, demanding accountability and asking what happened to their missing children.
So Bacalov applies the overwhelming, agonizing grief of the ancient Stabat Mater to this very real, modern-day atrocity that occurred in his homeland.
Exactly. Stabat La Madre demonstrates that beneath the cool, highly stylized exteriors of his film scores, there was a composer capable of confronting the darkest, most traumatic aspects of the human experience. He used the full weight of his orchestral and operatic mastery to memorialize a national trauma, demanding the audience bear witness through the music itself.
Which brings us to the mid-1990s, specifically 1994, and what stands as the ultimate undeniable triumph of his cinematic career.
The crowning achievement.
He scores a film directed by Michael Radford, starring the brilliant Massimo Troisi. The film is Il Postino, or The Postman.
And after decades of acting as, the unsung hero, the reliable workhorse in the pop studios, the ghostwriter robbed of his credit, the avant-garde experimenter. Luis Bacalov writes a score that simply demands the undivided emotional attention of the entire world.
Il Postino is such a beautiful, quiet, deeply melancholic film. It's about a simple, uneducated Italian postman who befriends the exiled Chilean poet Pablo Neruda.
Right.
The postman learns to use poetry to woo a local woman, but he also awakens to the political realities of the world. The film is tender and romantic, but it is also steeped in real-life tragedy.
Because of Troisi.
Yeah. The star, Massimo Troisi, had a severe heart condition. He actually postponed life-saving heart surgery just so he could finish filming.
Which is just heartbreaking.
He died a mere 12 hours after the main photography wrap. The emotional weight surrounding the film is immense.
It is. And Bacalov's score is the beating heart of that fragile emotion. It stands in stark contrast to the bombast of his westerns or the aggressive heaviness of his prog rock.
It's so different.
The main theme of Il Postino is incredibly delicate. Once again, he utilizes the bandoneon, weaving a melody that is simultaneously hopeful and deeply saturated with longing.
It's beautiful.
It is a masterclass in musical restraint, where a lesser composer might have overwhelmed the quiet tragedy of the film with sweeping, tear-jerking strings. Bacalov pulls back.
He lets it breathe.
Exactly. He doesn't over-orchestrate. He lets the simple, poignant melody breathe in the empty space.
And the industry finally paid attention. In 1996, Luis Bacalov won the Academy Award for Best Original Dramatic Score. He also swept the BAFTAs and Italy's prestigious David Di Donatello Awards. He stood on the stage at the Oscars, holding the golden statue, finally receiving the ultimate validation from the global film establishment.
An incredible moment.
He wasn't just a genre craftsman anymore. He was an Oscar-winning master.
And, hidden within the press tour for this massive, career-defining moment of triumph is a wonderfully poetic callback.
Oh, really?
Think back to the sheer injustice of a bullet for the general controversy.
Oh, the Morricone thing.
Yes. The brilliant score that was stolen from him, credited to Ennio Morricone, and the lawsuit that evaporated into bankruptcy.
It is the ultimate industry betrayal. It's the kind of thing that would make someone bitter for life.
Absolutely. But according to the sources, it was during an interview regarding his Oscar win for Il Postino that Bacalov finally publicly set the record straight about a bullet for the general.
Wait, he revealed the entire story to the press then?
He did.
He waited 30 years.
30 years.
He sat on that injustice for 3 decades.
He didn't complain bitterly to the tabloids when he was a struggling composer looking for sympathy. He bided his time.
Wow.
He waited until he had an Academy Award in his hand, until his own legacy and reputation were absolutely untouchable and beyond reproach. Only then did he calmly and simply correct the historical record.
That is just a remarkably classy, quietly powerful demonstration of patience and dignity.
It really is.
So let's pull all of this together. Let's synthesize the legacy of Luis Bacalov. Because calling him the second best Western composer after Morricone, which is a cheeky label some critics have lazily applied over the years, is just massively, unforgivably reductive.
It entirely misses the nature of his genius.
Completely.
Bacalov was the ultimate master synthesist. He possessed the unique ability to take the rigid architectural discipline of classical piano, the passionate, wheezing heartbeat of Argentinian tango, the immediate commercial hook of American rock and roll, and the atmospheric, psychological tension of European cinema, and fuse them all into a cohesive language that was uniquely his own. He wasn't imitating. He was translating the entire world of music through his highly specific cultural lens.
He was a chameleon, but no matter what color he turned to match his environment, the underlying structural brilliance was always present.
Always.
And that brings me to a final provocative thought that I want to leave you, the listener, with today. We mentioned Quentin Tarantino at the very beginning of this deep dive.
We did.
The sources point out that Tarantino frequently recycles Bacalov's music for his modern films. He used the original Django theme for Django Unchained. He lifted a piece of Bacalov's score from a 1972 film called The Grand Duel and used it to score the anime backstory sequence of the assassin O-Ren Ishii in Kill Bill.
Right, a musical pastiche taking existing tracks and dropping them into new visual context is a cornerstone of Tarantino's directorial style.
So here's the question for you to mull over. When a modern director like Tarantino takes an old, iconic piece of film music that was meticulously written for a very specific scene, a specific character, a specific emotional beat in 1966, and rips it out of that context to repurpose it for a totally new film in the 21st century, does that act elevate and immortalize the original composer's legacy?
That's a tough one.
Does it introduce brilliant music to a massive new generation who would never have dug through dusty vinyl crates to find it otherwise? Or does it strip the music of its original cinematic soul?
Right.
Does it tear the composition away from its roots, turning it into a mere pop culture reference that now belongs more to Quentin Tarantino's brand than it does to Luis Bacalov's original intent?
It is a profound debate about artistic ownership, historical context, and how cinematic history is consumed and recycled.
It really is.
For millions of younger viewers today, that Django theme isn't Franco Nero dragging a coffin through the mud. It's Jamie Foxx riding a horse in a bright blue suit. The visual imagery inherently associated with the music has been completely overwritten by a new author. Is that a triumph of endurance for the melody itself, or a tragic loss of its original grounded identity?
It is a complicated question without a simple answer, but it is precisely this debate that keeps Bacalov's art alive, pulsing, and incredibly relevant today.
Absolutely.
His music simply refuses to stay buried in the archives. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into these fascinating sources. Do yourself a favor tonight. Go track down the Django theme, or put on the quiet, melancholic score to Il Postino.
Highly recommend it.
But do it with fresh ears. Listen for the underlying tango. Listen for the strict classical architecture holding it all together. Listen for the razor-sharp pop hook. And remember, the lone gunslinger dragging his coffin through the mud, accompanied by the undeniable sound of a genius at work.